We continue now at the top of Daf Tube and Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 29b. The Gemara is continuing to discuss the machlokas between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda by bor. We know that Rabbi Meir says chayev. We know that Rabbi Yehuda says pater. The issue is, what exactly are they arguing about? There were two suggestions on the previous summit. One suggestion is that the machlokas between the two of them is talking in a situation of an ownerless bor. Rabbi Meir says in such a case it's chayev, and Rabbi Yehuda says since it's ownerless it's pater. And the other suggestion is they're arguing about niskal posheya or niskal la posheya. When a person stumbles, is that considered negligence? Rabbi Meir says it is considered negligence, that's why he says chayev. And Rabbi Yehuda says it's not considered negligence, that's why he says pater. And the Gemara now offers another suggestion about the machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says, la'achar nefila machlokes. The actual machlokes between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, specifically after the item falls, meaning to say again, the machlokes is when you have this ownerless item, are you chayev or not, in terms of bor? And again, Rabbi Meir says chayev and Rabbi Yehuda says pater. And the Gemara says, well, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the same question as we had before. Avol b'shas nefila mai. But what's Rabbi Yochanan saying when it comes to the moment of falling? Is he saying divrei hakol pater? Is he saying that everybody agrees in that situation pater? But from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says later on, lo tema masnisin Rabbi Meir hi do'amar niskal posheyahu, the phrase he says is, don't say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, who says that when one stumbles, it's considered negligence. So mechlal de Rabbi Meir mechayev. That sounds like Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabbi Meir says chayev in terms of niskal posheya. And so it can't be that everybody says pater, because clearly Rabbi Yochanan holds that Rabbi Meir says chayev. Elamai, so rather, what are you going to say according to Rabbi Yochanan? Divrei hakol chayev. Maybe everybody agrees chayev, even Rabbi Yehuda. But that also doesn't work. V'hamidukam Rabbi Yochanan lekaman, because from the same statement, from the fact that Rabbi Yochanan says later on, lo tema masnis and Rabbi Meir hi damar niskal posheya, that don't say our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir, who says niskal posheya, mechlal de patri rabbanan. That sounds like the Rabbanan who argue with Rabbi Meir would say niskal is lav posheya. And so therefore, what exactly is Rabbi Yochanan saying? And so the Gemara says, Eloha kamashmal, and rather what Rabbi Yochanan is teaching us is as follows: Demafkir nizakav dehachahu depatri rabbanan. That over here, when the person makes the items that damage, when he makes them ownerless, only over here the rabbanan say pater de'anasu, because this was a total accident. Aval mafkir nizakav dialma. But let's say a person purposely puts something on the road and makes it ownerless, then mechayvi, then even the rabbanan would agree that it's chayiv, and that's what Rabbi Yochanan meant to say when he said la'achar nefila machlokes. He meant specifically over here where it's an onus. You have a machlokas, but if it's not an onus, then everybody agrees, even though it's ownerless, everybody agrees chayiv. And Rashi says, lo tema masnis and Rabbi Meir hi. Again, this was the statement of Rabbi Yochanan. Don't say the Mishnah is following Rabbi Meir. Gabi shnei kadorim koyle kamon b'hai pirkin. That statement is made a little later on in this parak. And Rashi continues, Eloha kamashmal and Rabbi Yochanan. Rather, what Rabbi Yochanan is teaching is as follows: demafkir nizakav dehacha detchilaso onesu. This specific case of an ownerless situation of bor, there where the beginning of the whole thing was an onus, the patri rabbanan, and that's why the rabbanan say pater. Avol mafkir nizakav dialma. But let's say a person puts something in the road and he makes it ownerless in a normal situation, not ba'ones, kagon sheshlichu midas. He takes something and he purposely puts it on the road, or kagon bor b'rishas harabim, essentially like a regular bor b'rishas harabim, mechayvi. So then they're going to say, the rabbanan would say chayiv. V'hachi kamer, and this is what Rabbi Yochanan was saying. La'achar nefila machlokes. After it falls, there's a machlokes. Kilomar hay machlokes to pligi Rabbi Meir v'rabbanan behifkir nizakav la'achar nefilahu shetchilaso al yedei nefila. Meaning, what he's saying is this machlokes between Rabbi Meir and the rabbanan is specifically after it fell, after there was an accident and he was mafkir it. That's the machlokas. Aval al yedei hashlacha. But if the person would purposely throw it there, lo pligi, there is no argument. Everyone would say the person is chayiv. V'lo tidog me Rabbi Yochanan devshas nefila lo pligi. Don't make any kind of inference about at the moment of falling in terms of niskal posher or niskal la posher. You can't make any inference. Rabbi Yochanan was not discussing that at all. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, it was stated the following machlokas amoroim, mafkir nizakav, exactly the case we're discussing above. When somebody makes the items that cause damage, he renders them ownerless. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. It's a machlokas between Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Lazar. Chad Omar chayev, one says in this case is chayev, that's considered like a case of bor. The Chad Omar pater, and the other one says pater. And the Gemara says, Lema manda mechayev k'Rabbi Meir, umanda pater k'Rabbanan. So let's say exactly what we said above. The one who says chayev, that follows Rabbi Meir. Again, Rabbi Meir says if it's ownerless, you're chayev. And the one who says pater follows the Rabbanan. It's the exact same machlokas tanoim that we quoted above. And the Gemara says, Aliba de Rabbi Meir kuli alma lo pligi. Actually, according to Rabbi Meir, there everybody is in agreement. But ki pligi aliba de Rabbanan, but still there would be a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar within the Rabbanan. Meaning to say, man de pater k'Rabbanan. The one who says pater, that's exactly what the Rabbanan say. They say if it's ownerless, pater. But uman de mechayev, but the one who says chayev when it's ownerless, amar lach, he can say to you, ano damri, I feel the Rabbanan, I actually follow even the Rabbanan. Because ad kan lo patri Rabbanan, ela b'mafkir nizak of the hacha, exactly like we mentioned above in Rabbi Yochanan. Maybe the Rabbanan only say pater in this case, where the person was mafkir the items that caused damage. Misham da'anasu, because this was a case where it fell there originally bonus. It was an accident. Aval mafkir nizak of the alma, but let's say a regular situation of mafkir nizak of the person throws the things there on purpose. Mechayvi, maybe they would say chayiv, and they would agree with my position. And the Gemara continues to stayim. Let us conclude the Rebbe Elazar hu damar chayiv. That Rebbe Elazar is the one that says that this ownerless bor, that the person is chayiv. The Amar Rebbe Elazar mishum Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Shnei devarim einon b'reshus shel adam. There are two items that they're not really in the possession of the person. V'asan hakasav ki'ilu hein b'reshus, and the pasuk considers it as if they're in his possession, and they make him responsible. V'elu hein, and they are as follows: bor b'reshus haram, the case of a bor, a pit in reshus haram. That's exactly our case. It seems like Rabbi Elazar is saying in the name of Rabbi Yishmael that when you have a bor b'reshus haram, even though it's ownerless, but the pasuk still says, the Torah still considers your responsibility and your chayiv. That's why it seems like Rabbi Elazar says chayiv. And the second item, the chametz mishei shos ulamala, when it comes to chametz from 6 hours and onward, meaning at the time of Pesach. So chametz is something that really doesn't belong to you, but you're responsible, you're liable if you own the chametz, even though you can't really be the owner of the chametz. And so those two items are items which really aren't in your possession technically, but the Torah considers them to be in your possession. And the Gemara says this time, the Gemara says indeed you can conclude that. It seems like from this statement that Rabbi Elazar is saying exactly that. He's saying an ownerless bor, you are responsible. And the Gemara continues, Umiyamar Rabbi Elazar hachi, but does Rabbi Elazar really say that? We have a contradiction. V'amar Rabbi Elazar ibcha, but Rabbi Elazar said the opposite. Tetanan, as we learn the Mishnah coming up, hahofech es hagolol b'reshus harabim, if somebody turns over dung in reshus harabim, v'huzak b'hen acher, and somebody else is damaged, chayiv b'nisko, so the Mishnah over there says, you're chayiv to pay for the damages. V'yamar Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Elazar says, lo shanu ela sheniskavin liskos b'hen, this is only true in a situation where the person had intention to be the owner of the dung. Aval lo niskavin liskos b'hen, but if he did not have that intention, if it's ownerless, pater. So he's a pater. Seems the exact opposite. Alma mafkir and zakav pater. You see from here that Rabbi Elazar holds mafkir and zakav, that if he makes the items that damage, he makes them hefker, he's pater. And the Gemara says, Amar Ravada Barava, Ravada Barava says, Shecheziro limekoma. The case over there is that he returned it to its original place. In other words, that's why Rabbi Elazar says, in this case, if he just put it back where it already was, that's why Rabbi Elazar says pater. And the Gemara explains, Amar Ravina says, Mashal de Ravada Barava lemahadavar doma. What is a mashal to what Ravada Barava is saying? Lemotze bor megula v'chiso. Let's say a person finds a pit that's uncovered, and he covers it up. And then he goes ahead and he uncovers it again. He just puts it back to its original state. And so in that case, the person wouldn't be responsible. He really hasn't done anything. And so therefore, that's the same over here, where the person technically hasn't done anything. That's why in this case, he's going to be pater. But in general, Rebbe Elazar would say that by an ownerless pit, the person would be chayiv. But the Gemara doesn't like the comparison. Amarle Marzutra Bered Rav Mori Ravina. Marzutra, the son of Rav Mori, said to Ravina, "Mi dami, is that really a good comparison? Hasam over there, lo istalik luhu ma'isa rishon. The original thing that he did hasn't gone away. But but here that original action is completely gone, meaning here by the dung, it's like he's taking it away, it's like he's doing it from new. And the Gemara explains, Halo dummy, in this case of the dung, it's really comparable. El lemotze bor megula, let's say somebody finds a pit that's uncovered, v'tzhamima, and then he actually fills it with dirt, v'chazer v'chafer, and then he redigs it, there certainly he would be responsible. Because the original thing that happened, that's already gone, that pit was filled, and then he's the one that essentially dug it from new, and that should be the same thing by the dung. By the dung also, he took it away, put it back. That second person really should be responsible. That's not a reason to be pater. The kaimula b'reshusa, because again, now it's really in his reshus. He really should be responsible in this case. And so the Gemara says, Ela rather, Amar Ravashi says, the reason over here why the person is pater, according to Rabbi Elazar, even though really Rabbi Elazar holds by an ownerless pit is chayiv, kishahavcha lepachas mishlosha, because what he did is, when he turned it over, he never lifted it more than 3 tvachim. He never really, it's not considered halachically like he lifted it off the ground, and that's why he's not responsible. Essentially, it's been that way from before he came along, and he's not responsible for what he did in this situation. But the Gemara says, but why does Rabbi Elazar give such a dochik, such a forced approach to say that that in this case, the only reason that he's potter is going to be if it's less than 3, and when it's less than 3, if he has kavana to take possession, then he's chayiv, because again, the Mishnah over there said chayiv, and Rabbi Elazar is saying, the Mishnah is talking about a scenario where he does it within less than 3 tefachim to the ground, which really you should be potter, and the reason why in the Mishnah is chayiv is because he has kavana to be the owner. If it's ownerless, then it wouldn't be a problem in this case where it was less than 3. Ha'ein miskavin lizkos bolo, but again, if the person had no intention to be the owner, then he would not be responsible because it's within 3 tvachim to the ground. Why not just understand the Mishnah simply? Lukma l'malami gimel, what Rabbi Elazar should have said is the Mishnah is talking about a regular case where he lifts it up more than 3 tvachim from the ground, and then it could follow Rabbi Elazar's opinion that even if he has no kavana to be the owner, even if it's ownerless, chayiv, he's going to be chayiv, because that's what we said is Rabbi Elazar's opinion. So even if we're going to say that Rabbi Elazar holds that in general, by an ownerless bor, the person is chayiv, but still the interpretation of that Mishnah is very forced. Should simply say, if that's the case, that's what we're talking about. You lifted it up more than 3 tvachim, and that's why you're chayiv. Why say it's less than 3 tvachim, and you're having intention to be the owner of the dung? And the Gemara says to that, Rava says, Masnisin Kashise, the reason why Rabbi Elazar interpreted the Mishnah in that fashion was because the language of the Mishnah bothered him. My area hafach, because why using the language of hafach? Hafach sounds like you just turned it over as if you didn't lift it. Listen to Higbiyah, it should have said he lifted it up. El Ashmami, no, rather, what do you see? Kal hafach lamata mishloshu, that when it says the word hafach, it means within 3 tvachim of the ground, and therefore, since it was within 3 tvachim of the ground, again, Rabbi Elazar said, if it's ownerless, so then you're not going to be chayiv, but if you want to take possession of it, so then that's what the Mishnah is talking about when it says chayiv. And Rashi explains, Elamar Ravashi, rather Ravashi says, Hadamuki Rabbi Elazar lemasnisin hachalo niskavin lizkos bapater. When Rabbi Elazar says this Mishnah is talking about a situation where the person did not have an intention to be the owner of the dung, specifically when he overturned it, but he never lifted it more than 3 tvachim. Since he didn't lift it 3 tvachim, that's not considered lifting it up. It's like the bore was there all along, open all along. It was never closed. Since he had no intention to become the owner of the dung, so he's not going to be chayiv because it's his property, because he's not the owner. He's also not chayiv in terms of bor, because again, he really hasn't done anything. Now, nevertheless, if he would have kavana to be the owner, so then he'd be chayiv, because that's like his own property doing the damage. And the idea over here is that chabata, they change it to habata, which means to look at it, to view it, that's going to be considered a kinyan by hefker, even though it wasn't lifted up. And the Gemara continues, from the fact that Rabbi Elazar is the one who says that by an ownerless pit the person is chayiv, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Pater would come out that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that would say Pater. And so the Gemara asks on that, Rabbi Yochanan, does Rabbi Yochanan really say that? But we learned in the Mishnah, let's say somebody puts a thorn or glass in the Rosh Hashanah, or let's say his fence is made out of thorns, or his fence falls into Rosh Hashanah, and someone is damaged by these items, chayiv ben nizko. So the Mishnah says the person is chayiv to pay for any damages. V'yomer Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said on that Mishnah, Lo shanu ela b'mafriach, that's only true. Let's say you have a situation of the fence that's made out of thorns, it has to be mafriach. The thorns have to actually be sticking into the Rosh Hashanah. Avol b'mitzamseim potter, but if it's within his own property, so then he's potter. And the Gemara analyzes Rabbi Yochanan, mitzamseim my time of potter. What's the reason that mitzamseim is potter according to Rabbi Yochanan? Lav mishum dahavale bor b'rishu, so that's because it's a pit, but it's a pit within his own property. Mechlal, and that would imply the chiyuv the bor, that the standard chiyuv, the normal case of bor where you're chayiv b'rishus harabim. Who is talking about a bor b'rishus harabim? Alma mafkir nezakav chayiv. That would imply that Rabbi Yochanan holds on the contrary, that by mafkir nezakav, by a situation where it's an ownerless items that did the damage, so you're actually chayiv in that case. That would be the opposite of what we just said. Rashi explains, again, he places the thorn or the glass in Rosh Hashanah. He makes a fence out of thorns. The stam geder shel avonim, because generally fences are made out of stones. Like it says in the pasuk. And then the other case of the Mishnah is a stone fence that falls into Rosh Hashanah. And again, Rabbi Yochanan said, Lo shanu de poder bekotzim chayiv. We only say that this thorn fence that he's chayiv, ela b'mafriach. That's only by mafriach. Rosh kotzoseh b'Rosh Hashanah, meaning the thorns are sticking into Rosh Hashanah. To have a bor b'Rosh Hashanah, meaning it has to be a bor b'Rosh Hashanah. Avol tzimtzum on l'soch shalo, but if it's all within his property, to have a bor b'Reshusa, which is a bor in his own property, v'yafagav dehifki Reshusa, and even though he's allowing people, he's making his area ownerless, he's allowing people to walk through there, sheikseil Rosh Hashanah, he's allowing the public to use it, potter, he's still potter. And so again, that would imply the classic case of bor is a bor b'Rosh Hashanah, and that would imply Rabbi Yochanan holds an ownerless bor, that you're actually chayiv. And the Gemara continues, lo, no, liola me malach, really I can say to you, mafkir nezakav potter, that a case of mafkir nezakav is actually potter. The classic case is not a bor b'Rosh Hashanah. Umitzamsein my time a potter, and if that's the case, so why is mitzamsein potter? Mitzamsein should be a bor b'Rosh, so you should be chayiv. And the answer to that is mishum de itmar Allah, because it was stated on that. Amar Ravacha Breder Ravika. Ravacha Breder Ravika says l'fi shein darkon shel bnei adam l'schachech b'ksalim. It's a different reason altogether. It's not normal for people when they're walking through the Rosh Hashanah to rub up against walls. So in general, it really could be that bor b'Reshuso is going to be chayiv. But when it's a wall that we're talking about, there's a special reason that Rabbi Yochanan says potter. And Rashi explains, l'schachech b'ksalim, it's not normal for people to rub up against the walls. V'zeshin is chachech v'uzak meshunahu, this person who rubbed up against the wall and he was injured, that's a strange kind of situation. Umafriach hainu taima dechayiv. Now by mafriach, when it's sticking into the Rosh Hashanah, why are you chayiv? Sharei memonahu. So the reason for that is because it's actually his property, v'lo hifkiran, and it's not ownerless. Because again, in this situation, we're saying Rabbi Yochanan holds that if it's ownerless, you're actually going to be potter. V'hifrichon l'makom mahalach b'nei adam. He's putting it into a place where people walk, that's why he's chayiv in that case. And the Gemara continues, Umiyamar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, but still, does Rabbi Yochanan really say this? Rashi says, Umiyamar Rabbi Yochanan Hachi, the mafgir nizak of potter. Does Rabbi Yochanan really say that if somebody makes those items that do damage, they make it ownerless, that it's potter? V'yamar Rabbi Yochanan, but didn't Rabbi Yochanan say halacha is stam mishnah, that the halacha generally follows a stam mishnah, that's a mishnah that's not attributed to any particular tana? Utznan, and we learned in the mishnah, hachofer bor b'Rosh Hashanah, if someone digs a pit in Rosh Hashanah, v'naval esocho shorach hamor, and into the pit falls an ox or a donkey, a mason, it dies, chayiv is chayiv. Seems like the classic case of bor is an ownerless pit. Rashi says, bor b'Rosh Hashanah, al mechiyuva de bor b'Rosh Hashanah. You see that the general chiyuv of bor is a bor b'Rosh Hashanah. Again, that's a situation of an ownerless kind of pit in Rosh Hashanah, and it says chayiv. And so the Gemara says, you're right, ela rather, liolam Rabbi Yochanan amar chayiv. Really, Rabbi Yochanan says chayiv in these cases. Umid Rabbi Yochanan amar chayiv, and we'll go the opposite direction. From the fact that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says chayiv, so that would imply that Rabbi Elazar amar potter, that it's Rabbi Elazar is the one who says that if it's ownerless potter. But that again contradicts what Rabbi Elazar said earlier. V'amar Rabbi Elazar, but didn't Rabbi Elazar say? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Amud Aleph.